And it wasn't until I was going to an interview and literally spilt lip gloss like all down my shirt that I finally won. And I attribute it to being able to go in there and finally be myself. So I no longer was
Yes.
able to be perfect. I no longer had to be this robot that I thought I had to be. And I walked in and I was like, hey, I'm Maria,
Yeah.
the clumsiest person ever. Like, what do you want to talk about?
Welcome back to another episode of the Keys to the Commonwealth podcast. Landry Fields excited for another episode here today. And with my longtime friend here, we're going to take a little bit of different path today, talking about brand, I think, and all that is in social media and so forth, and how that can be key to a lot of our businesses and just everything happening today. So without further ado, I introduce Maria Montgomery to the episode. How are you?
Hi, good. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah,
How are
been
you?
a long time coming.
I know.
We finally made it work. We are your guest number uno in the new studio
I
here.
am honored.
So,
it looks so good.
Yeah, so
I'm impressed.
For those who may not know, we took a little bit of a hiatus over the holidays as we have a brand new studio. So super stoked about this. So if those are listening online, go check us out on the social media side of things. You can kind of see what that looks like. We're on YouTube. But
It looks so good.
Yeah.
I'll give you a lot of props here. The production quality is high.
Like I said,
So,
I'm very particular about certain things. This is
Done it
my
right.
domain. My office is my domain. Like, I'm kind of care too much about decorating and stuff like that in a weird way,
That's
as far
good.
as how things look and being specific, and so I'm not the
perfect.
normal kind of guy in that perspective.
I have a
But,
fear of overhead lights, and I'm thankful you don't have them.
hanging overhead lights.
No, just like actual. I'm being sarcastic, but like when
Yeah.
people come in, and you just have overhead lights, and
Oh,
it
like
creates
right
terrible,
there?
terrible shadows on your face. Everyone
Yes.
looks terrible, and girls will come to me and they'll be like, "Why do I hate this photo?" I'm like, "It's just lighting. It's not you. It's the lighting. Put a light in front of your face, like these wonderful lights you
There
have."
you go.
So
I know,
very
got
well
some
done.
upgraded lights and stuff like that. So yeah. But yeah, so most people would probably know you from what I've seen you online, a billboard driving by locally in
gosh.
Kentucky and so forth like that. But jump back a little bit. Where are you from originally?
Yeah.
How'd you kind of get to where we are today?
Sure. I'm from small town Danville, Kentucky, Boyle County. So I went to Boyle County High School.
Yep.
The sweetest, greatest place to grow up. They were so supportive of me. And I, from there, I went to undergrad at EKU.
Okay.
Right away, I won Miss Kentucky USA while I was there, which was like the youngest of the windows. I was technically youngest contestant at Miss USA. So my point is that
What were
kind of.
you, 18, 19?
I was not just turned 19.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that took over my college experience is why I bring that up.
Yeah.
Which was great. Very grateful. But I feel like I wasn't fully at any college because of that. I was gone a lot, but then I did my master's degree through Western.
Okay.
They had a fully online program at the time, and they still do. And I was living in Miami at that time. So,
Yeah.
so my point is, with being gone throughout undergrad and online grad school, I'm not really sure where I belong college wise.
Just didn't have the typical undergrad type of experience, obviously.
Exactly,
in that sense, but
exactly. Which there's pros and cons of that, but
For sure.
wouldn't trade it for anything. But yes, UK fans. I feel like I've done like a tour of the state between Eastern to Western to always being a UK fan. So, and then so I lived in Chicago and, like I said, in Miami, back and forth for several years. Came back home to Kentucky, and here we are.
Yeah. So had you, I assume, had always been doing pageants of sorts and things of that
I
nature?
I was not a hardcore pageant girl,
Okay. 'Cause
actually.
that world gets crazy, right?
Cray, like straight crazy. I mean, those people.
Like I've seen the little
If you-
pageant
yeah.
thing, like an episode back in the day.
If you sell your soul to it, it is
Yeah.
not it can be hard on people.
Sure.
That's not what I did. I didn't start until I was like 16, and I only competed in the Miss USA was my last pageant I did. So there's
Okay.
three years.
Yeah.
So
It's a very short window.
yeah, I guess 4 technically, but yeah. So it was. I only did a handful really. I started out with my home county, Miss Boyle County. I wanted it
Oh, yeah?
so bad. Could not win for my life. I was first runner up over and over again. And I have a coaching business now where I help girls
Yeah.
with interview skills and stage presence and things. And I always like to tell them that story because I could not win. I was first runner up, I think, 4 times between teen and miss. And it wasn't until I was going to an interview and literally spilt lip gloss like all down my shirt that I finally won. And I attribute it to being able to go in there and finally be myself. So I no longer was
Yes.
able to be perfect. I no longer had to be this robot that I thought I had to be. And I walked in and I was like, hey, I'm Maria,
Yeah.
the clumsiest person ever. Like, what do you want to talk about?
Yeah.
And anyways, that's when my career essentially took off because I won that title, which took you to a state pageant in Kentucky. It's called Miss Kentucky County Fair. and that's when all the county fair title holders compete. So you have to have that to get to go.
Is that at the state fair?
It's at the Galt House.
It
sounds more redneck than it is. It's really, really nice. So there's 93 girls from all the different counties, and I was beyond shocked to win that because I was really like, people called me a no name, like they were not thrilled because these girls go every year to compete. So I
just carried over I'm just going to be authentic here.
The lip gloss moment. And so then from there, I won another state pageant, and that took me to the technical Miss Kentucky that December, Miss Kentucky USA, which took me to Miss USA the following April. At the time, owned by Donald Trump and NBC. And at that is where in Vegas for 2.5 weeks is where I placed in the top 5. And that started the modeling and TV career, which is I'm beyond shocked and grateful to still be doing 16 years later.
Yeah.
So
whirlwind of a scenario there, and it's in that capacity, and some things I definitely want to dive into in that sense. So you ended up coming back. You went to got your master's. What did you get your master's in?
Speech language pathology.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I don't use it.
I mean, do really any of us use a lot of?
I know.
When
I think about that, it makes me feel better. But it's fabulous. World speech paths, I feel like mostly love their jobs. I loved working with kids while I was getting my degrees. But thankfully, this world has not stopped. And I feel like the interpersonal skills and the creative mindset that I've become accustomed to and working for myself would be really hard to give up at this point.
I can attest, but we're always trying to figure. And I pivoted, like we talked about. Had a bit, and I don't think most people know, I had a bit of a music background, so I'm grateful that didn't take off near as well as yours did, because now with kids, that would have been a whole lot of a harder life on the road and so forth. But as far as that, let's try and kind of talk about how you probably kind of had to reinvent yourself a little bit in some ways, especially when COVID hit in that sense.
Absolutely,
and just. We're going to kind of dive into, like I said, more brand and identity aspect of today, how that world has vastly changed. You look at like Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and stuff like that, and how like a lot of times these bigger brands have realized they needed kind of a face to kind of go with it, and more so, talk about the Gary Vaynerchuk stuff. We got the book right behind me here about just being a brand, just like constantly putting your face out there, which can be hard for a lot of people to do so, right? Yeah. I was very comfortable behind a microphone. Yeah. Cool, I'm good with that. But you stick me in front of a camera, all of a sudden, you know how it is. Yeah. People, it was like they don't know what to do. It's kind of like for me with recording music. People would be great musicians, and then you hit this thing called a metronome, and it's like you have to play everything exact, and all of a sudden it's like they don't know how to play music anymore, type of scenario. So I probably attest that in that way. Sure. But I mean, what have you seen just in your, because you're doing modeling for a long time. You're still doing modeling, obviously, in that sense, for who specifically?
So my careers really broke up into thirds, I like to say. So there's the modeling side, and you ask who. I have several different agencies across the country, so they all cover different markets, and then those agencies cover different clients.
Gotcha.
So that's the modeling side of things, and then I have TV, which is the second portion, and then the coaching is really the third. And I see the social media branding that you're speaking of kind of being dispersed through them all.
Yeah. Is coaching thing new? Or is it?
I started it when I kind of by mistake. Girls just kept asking for help. And with you talked about reinventing yourself. It existed pre-COVID, but after COVID, whenever I was forced to be here more and not on the road as much, in my world, everything stopped. Because all my work required travel. At that point, I had maybe 2 Kentucky clients that were monthly commercials I do. Yeah. For 10 years, I had no Kentucky clients. A lot of people didn't know. Like a lot of people think I'm just now kind of starting, but a lot existed before I moved.
Well, it kind of proves the concept of sometimes going deeper into niches type of scenario, and sometimes if you're trying to just do so broad, very few can even obtain that. But then you're like, hey, I'm just going to focus in on the Kentucky side of things because like here's where I'm at. I've got to be here. Yeah. The world, the health stuff within the world kind of changed, and so then it probably just exploded once you kind of really were able to kind of hyper-focus that.
It was a blessing in disguise for sure. Being here just meant I was more available to meet with girls face to face. A lot of what I do is virtual. Like yesterday, I coached a girl for one in Missouri, one in Illinois, doing those state pageants coming up. But it did help me be more available. So it was talk about reinventing yourself. It was also very interesting because at that time I was single. My dad was actually passing away. He died February 20th. COVID hit March 15th really here. So we got so lucky to be able to be in the hospital with him and everything before that happened. His is pancreatic cancer, completely irrelevant, obviously.
Right.
But I mean, talk about a year to refocus. I mean, because then I'm forced to be here. I'm living with my sister, which was fabulous. Loved my time there with her. That was so much fun. She's a hoot.
Yeah.
But then I'm forced to kind of look within and think like, what do I, you just realize how short life is with losing him, but also realizing how much I love Kentucky and that I want to be here where my mom is. She was alone now and at that time. And so it kind of just makes you realize what's important. And that family, is more important than living in Chicago and Miami and everything that I was doing before then.
And I bet you're probably like me where it took me traveling outside of Kentucky to appreciate what we had.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely seen that.
I mean, it's a special place here. And so we are so, it's easy to take it for granted when that's kind of all you know. So when you travel, you're like, oh, not everywhere is, so breathable and easy and welcoming and hospitable. So very grateful for that. But another blessing that came out of COVID times really is so I eventually met my now husband. We started dating, oh gosh, summer of 2021, I believe. And so he and my agencies, because of COVID, started asking for my first job with him was in Nashville. It was a music video.
Yeah.
And they asked, do you have a guy in Nashville that you're used to working with, that you have good chemistry with, that you can do this music video with? And I thought of a few guys that I know. I'm like, because it had to be someone that you're with COVID restrictions, And I was like, well, I can just bring my boyfriend. Like he played basketball at UK, so he was used to that kind of spotlight and those photo shoots and things. He was pretty new to the modeling and acting world.
Yes.
And so anyways, brought him in. The dude took over the whole job, killed it. He had to play a drunk guy that I was leaving. So he's had lots of practice. Just kidding. But he did great. And so
and I have a music video you can go back and watch at any point in time to kind of realize,
he really did so good. I was like, oh, okay. So then that turned into another job and now he's represented by 2 of my agencies. We work all the time together, whether it be for clients here or we shot international for Royal Caribbean through Italy, Spain, and Greece last winter, last fall. Yeah,
that's awesome.
We shot for them in the Bahamas. We've done several things together now. We've shot for several casinos across the country. We do a lot with resorts and traveling and things, and that's
which is probably nice because it's you get to go take a vacation and then come back home at the
exactly. Well, the Europe trip was right after our wedding. Everyone was like, "Oh, you get a free honeymoon." I'm like, "Well, I wouldn't go that far." It was lovely 2.5 weeks, but I'm talking 4 a.m. makeup calls. So
that's the part people don't see. They think it looks, with me the music side of things. It's like it was such a grind and so forth.
Such a grind.
You get to see this small glimpse of the peak and pinnacle of somebody's with the sports or modeling or acting or music or something like that on those types of art scales, but the grind that it just takes behind the scenes.
I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, you get to play dress up for a living," and I'm like, "Well, it's a little more than that, especially the time when I'm not on set. There's so much that goes into it before I ever even step on set." So,
that's neat.
Yeah, so
that's let's go back to the authentic aspect. However you first kind of won the Miss
Boyle County.
Yeah. Yes, and I think that's an idea, especially when it comes to brand, that it's so easy to feel like we're supposed to portray something or a certain image and in anything capacity, whether it's me as the owner of a couple of different businesses and so forth like that. But realizing that it's the realness, the authentic aspect that we can if we're vulnerable enough to portray a lot of times, that really draws people in. And how do you balance that, or what have you learned in that capacity? I'm sure it's a little bit harder to consider being more of a modeling side of things where you're kind of supposed to portray, but you still suck people in by being authentic at the same time.
Yeah, and I will say a lot of that I attribute to just the change of the market over the years. When I started out modeling, it was towards the end of an era, but in an era where they told you they would measure you all the time and tell you to do squats and tell you, lose 2 inches here and there and whatever. So thankfully it still exists, but it's not what it once was, thank goodness. Okay. And so my point is, it was all kind of leaning towards more authentic. And I have found a lot of my repetitive clients that are booked through my agencies or directly are because they like working together. So I had one time I shot for this brand, and it was just my hands, just a hand modeling job. And so when they booked me, I was like, well, this is random. Okay. Right. And I get there, and it's a producer that I've worked with before. I didn't know he was behind it. Okay. And he's like, oh, we had so much fun on set last year. He's like, I could have booked anybody. So I just, so I was just like, awesome. Like,
Yeah.
and that just is eye opening. And then I love, like, when I first lived in Miami, they were trying to get me to post my work more on social media, and that felt very show offy.
Yes. I 100% agree with this. And
Yeah,
I want to interject
that was
right here.
hard. Yeah, that was really hard. And social media was different then. It wasn't what it is now, but still, it took me a while to really listen to him and to that agent and start posting. And thank goodness I did. But then I just felt so much more free and so much better responses when it was just genuine. And I think
Yes.
the way people like my goal now is to not be perfect. And I think sometimes when people know what I do for a living, they hold that against me, and that's not always great. Like a lot of influencers that do really well don't have a modeling background,
Sure.
or they're just because they can appear more approachable from the outside looking in. And so I try pretty hard to be approachable and real because that's who I am. Like, obviously, like that is the reality of it. I'm a small town girl that's
right,
far from
Kentucky.
perfect. Yeah.
That's right.
But also like it's more freeing as well. So I really love to lean into that side of things.
And I'm glad you brought that up in the sense that when I first started this podcast, I was very much so like, I don't want it to be about me. And so forth. And I, for the first year, just labeled everything from the podcast name. So for those that have been around this is now season 4 actually of the podcast. I was like, I didn't want to be about me, so I didn't attach my name to it really in any capacity, and just kind of had this, this separate Instagram account or separate stuff that was kind of separate. And then someone really hit me the other day, and not the other day, but early on during that first season or right after that first season, just saying how like, you are the brand, being me being with as the face of the company and starting the company. And I was like, well, I mean, that's true. They're like, you just need to start just putting that all and promoting. And I was like, they're like, you're not really promoting yourself, but try to be authentic, and people, really gravitate to that. So I kind of did a 180 season 2 and really started just branding it myself. And for those that know, I mean, obviously I have some businesses and we never really talk about those businesses. But just use that to get to know a lot of people and try to be authentic and hopefully give some advice here whenever I can off clips, or give somebody the strength or courage to do something that is outside of their comfort zone, just like I did in this case. I'm sure you did, stepping outside into some of these things. But
yeah. I think that's really important to have your brain behind it, especially when it's a podcast and you're talking and it's very conversational, and you want people to be able to relate to that and to realize where you're coming from in your background. So I think that was.
And sometimes podcasts, as you know, the conversation part where you can't really truly just glamorize or take, you could, I guess you can, in theory, could do some of these things, but if it's just a conversation, that's really as authentic as it gets, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really why I like doing it. And I had to get over that fear, and was like, let's just turn the camera on, and I got to get over this.
And that's, I mean, to get over that is hard. I have a friend that she just says, count from 5 to 1 and get out of your head and just do it. Like, there's so many times I want to post this or that on social media, and you think about it. If I think about it too much, I won't do it.
Yeah.
And if you just do it and don't care, then that's usually the things that go out with the reels and things that I like overproduce and like spend hours and hours editing on. Those are the ones that don't do anything. And then the ones that are like nothing on accident, are what do well. So that's just another, point of the authenticity, I guess, that people want. But yeah, it's hard to keep putting yourself out there. And in my role, I do several castings a week. My agency send me another benefit of COVID. You can do those from home now. They're all like self-tapes. They used to have to drive places to do them.
Probably less awkward, so you can just do it in your living room rather than in front of people now?
It is less awkward. And you can like watch it back and, which is good and bad. I'll do it. I'll spend 3 hours, and then I'm like, this is just going to be terrible. So there's pros and cons. If you're live in person, then you're like, you get your one take and that's it. But anyways, like those are the definition of awkward. Like so awkward a lot of times. Like I did one last week for another casino, and it's like, pretend to be winning money, and just like, I'm in my little casting room. I'm just like, this is so dumb. But
but the same thing, you could say there's pressure in anything we do, like whether it's different things of business. I have done more public speaking as of late, which is a whole different level of stuff when you're like, where something's maybe not truly scripted. Like with music, it was very easy to be like, this is the script type of scenario, just stick with it, get off stage type of scenario, where if you're having to be more comfortable ad-libbing of sorts and just like talking and communicating. So being on stage talking in that capacity has been it's not something I was definitely accustomed to it, but even what I had done for years, talking on stage in some capacities was very scripted, and so it was kind of very new for me to kind of be kind of like conversing something that
Yeah.
sometimes you like feel like you're not adequate enough to teach about or talk about, but it's been good. And so, back to, I want to talk about the social media aspect and how that's kind of really maybe changed when you kind of said, hey, I want to start putting myself out there like that, like kind of like I did in that respect. But back to the brand side of things within the social media. And I think we've really seen that change since COVID for sure.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
more so of how, for me, that's just really just becoming a billboard for me type of scenario. Like Gary V's like, content.
Yeah.
We're talking about that as far as just putting yourself out there for being a billboard of sorts, and really having conversations with people kind of pointing to the fact that really that was going to become, content was going to become the new currency of sorts, meaning, it wasn't necessarily how many Facebook ads you could properly run, et cetera. It was like, that was going to become a big part of just like a brand aspect that was not just behind a logo, but was also now behind a person's face
Their
more
life,
and more so because of the social media side of things.
True.
So what have you seen? Because obviously a lot of businesses have started to do some of that. You probably more insight than I do in some of that respect. So.
Sure. So a lot of times, kind of going back to what I was saying before about in Miami, when that agent kept telling me to post more, I was really uncomfortable with it. But now I love it because instead of clients going online to the agencies and seeing just my portfolio and whatnot, they now can see my personality when they go on social. And
more control over it in some respects.
Yeah. You have a lot more control, a lot more responsibility as well. That kind of, sometimes I'm like, so why am I giving you 20%? I don't know. But just kidding. So for any agents listening out there. But they really push us to have it. And which is, to me, is also a struggle because I'm trying to fit 3 different avenues. So if I post, I rarely post like just straight modeling stuff anymore, because they can see that on the agency side if they want to. But then people will be like, oh, so you're not modeling more as much anymore. I'm like, that's still like my bread and butter.
Did you click the link?
Yeah, I know exactly. So, but on those agencies' websites, they will have a link to our social now, which is a drastic change. When I first started modeling, those profiles and those agency websites were private. You couldn't even see the models until you were like a client. Yeah, wild. Big change. So, but yeah, and then so that with the like you said, the brand development. I mean, think about how many people open social media, post a magazine, or even see TV commercials. So that's kind of the place I try to put everything. So that at the meeting I had earlier today was for one of my ongoing clients. They shoot out of Pennsylvania. And we have to do these national commercials, and they were just talking about the difference of wanting to push social more for me because they see that's a good fit for what they think I do with the short form type of stuff. So, but they've seen that because of what I've posted.
Yeah.
So it's just constant self-promotion, which is hard. My list of things and ideas for social media to edit and to create is extensive on my phone. It's a daily reminder. It's so frustrating because I'm the kind of person that I'm the kind of self-employed person that I have these endless ideas, and it's not just an idea for me, it's a to-do list thing. So then I just drown in my to-do list. And just never will ever have that to zero. Never ever. The ideas keep coming, which is great, but the time is limited. So
you're like, if I could have 2 of me, I've said that so many times. Like,
that's exactly. And I have like a girl that will edit for me, and she does a great job. But then I just get so personal with it. I'm like, well, this is like a day in the life thing, or for a specific client, it's like I want to create it. I want to do it, and then I'm not good at delegating. That's something I really need to be better at.
I think honestly, entrepreneurs, I think that is the hardest part for entrepreneurs, because you have so particular, like we were talking about with the studio. I was very particular how I wanted the studio to look, that offloading that to someone else, or sometimes you're like, hey, this is what I expect or what I want, or sometimes I'll get into the point of like, hey, I know enough about this to know I've reached my limit of what I'm capable of with this, but now I can trust that I can find the right person that can go beyond what I'm capable in this case.
Knowing your weaknesses is very important, and your strengths, and learning to delegate. So I'm trying to be better about that. Yeah.
And with the social media side of things, like that's been such a difference now moving forward with scenarios and with brand and with being the face, being authentic, but being able to do it in a way that kind of sets you apart and doesn't become inundated with just like stuff over and over and over from the same person. It can be hard, but as far as the future goes, and you don't have to really dive into this, it's just more of like really, I think what a lot of conversations I've been having lately, which obviously it's vastly changing in that capacity with how quickly things can just be recreated with. I don't necessarily want to go down that AI train here kind of scenario, but like distinguishing yourself as authentic is going to become more and more of a way that's really going to stand out as more and more the market becomes inundated with not inauthentic, almost sometimes fake, whatever type of stuff. kind of?
One of my clients, this was funny, but another one of my ongoing production teams I work with, they had me in the office the other day to do some voiceovers to supplement a commercial we shot. And they played something for me. They're like, we need you to say this line. And they played it. And it was my voice that was AI'd to say this line. And I was like, oh God, like I could lose so much. So many clients, so many jobs because of that. And so, last thing I want to do is give people ideas here, but I mean, if you shoot what they call an evergreen commercial where I'm just saying like, welcome to whatever, or this is whatever, and then you AI my voice to say the special that's offering, then there's no need for me to come back in studio and reshoot these, deals, or whether it be for a car dealership or whatever. That is doing that.
Which is where brand, I think, has become more and more important. Like if you establish yourself in a capacity with you are the brand of sorts, people can't just take that type of scenario.
Right.
I mean, so that's why I think it's more and more important.
Someone suggested to pretty much copyright your actual voice now is needed. Yeah. So I was
that's a good point.
Geez, I never thought that day would come.
That's a great
and
point.
a lot of the modeling side of things, again, has drastically changed. A lot is e-commerce now. So just what you see online when you shop. So when I first started modeling, we would come and do a lot of huge campaigns and ads, and then other days you did e-com. So the difference is on a regular day you may shoot 3 items and they spend a lot of time, and you're moving or you're have different sets, or it's much more lifestyle. E-com, I shoot for I guess I can say this. I shoot for Marshalls almost every week, TJ Maxx Marshalls.
Okay.
Every week pretty much, and we will go through 125 items. So you just shoot front, back, front, back, front, back. I mean, you just knock them out. So it's
spending more time changing than you are actually in front of the camera.
By far, yeah. And that's how all clients are, and they do a really good job streamlining that and making it pleasant. But it's very, very common, and some clients will even shoot mouth down now. You can just rip through them so much quicker, without hair, makeup, and everything. So it's all about the efficiency, and I think social media has affected that greatly because they see, like you said, you can do it with less production. You can do it, there's more people that can do it because of what we've learned through behind our phones.
There's been some great things aspect for sure, because I can take this, and we talk about this stuff, but the reality is a lot of people won't even take advice, or it's decided that they want to do it, but they don't. But for example, we take this full video, the AI will chop the whole thing up, transcribe it, put the things on it. We'll say, hey, here's 20 different 30-second clips. Yeah. That saves so much just from a time perspective in that capacity from us. So we still want to go and do producing. And Alex Ramosi talks about a lot of this, how they really fine tune just how it's almost like the human psychology aspect of how people are going to react, or what's going to be something they connect to in that capacity. So. But personal brand, like I said, it's going to be, I think, huge moving forward, because it separates yourself from just the fake AI aspect that's out there, as people obviously know you and your face in that capacity and used to that. So, they're more and more likely to be like, hey, I know Maria's face type of thing. I don't know whatever this fake face is.
Right. And,
so maybe I'm drawn more to that.
And I hope so. And I agree that the importance of that, excuse me, is very real in that, whenever I work with a client repetitively, I have noticed a huge correlation with that. So I'll be whenever I hosted the UK basketball games, all the guys, you're the UK girl. But then all the blue coat guys there called me the Bob Allen girl, because that's the dealership from my hometown that I do the monthly commercials, the billboards. They're one of my favorites, ongoing supporters. Awesome. Yeah. So it's just really interesting. But they know you as that. And then now those national commercials I was talking about earlier, it's West Shore Home, and it's a home renovation, a bath renovation company, and windows. And so then they'll be like, you're the window girl. And I'm like, out of all things I've done, that's that. It's just funny what people will pick. Yeah. But it's also eye-opening, because I see where you see me. Are you on social? Or some people don't, because I don't post a lot of that on social. So I'm like, if you're only on social, you don't know that I do hardly any of that. I'll post Bob Allen stuff or whatnot, but it's not in detail. I don't post the commercials on there.
And that's a great point, I think, to kind of wrap up here. And the point about different places that people see you. Yeah. And so, I realized too, I was limiting myself, and I wasn't putting myself on, LinkedIn much. And I'm sure I don't think you're probably doing that part of it.
I'm on it, but I don't use it really.
But hey, people are going to find you or work or as far as the marketing perspective, going to in different places. why not just be in all those places at the same
Absolutely.
time? So,
Yeah.
whether it's YouTube, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, which Facebook, can we talk about the surprising comeback that had?
I know.
X, YouTube, LinkedIn, et cetera, and so forth. So that's what we try to do. And I think that from a brand perspective for businesses or something like that, it's important to be everywhere that you can be and not just limit to yourself, because people are going to find you through different avenues. So why limit yourself, especially when you can repurpose different content or things across them. So I think you're just selling yourself short in that capacity.
I agree. You just have to be findable. And a lot of people think like, oh, I don't post on TikTok or Instagram or whatever. I'm like, it's not really about that. Just that you have to be findable.
Yes.
And so then send them to a website. Like it just has to have a different avenue for different people and their preferences and things. So I think that's a great piece of advice to give for sure.
And the reality is, and I'm not going to use this clip particular, which is if people see your face constantly like a billboard, I don't care if they watch the content at all. It's just the fact that I'm seeing my face constantly as they're scrolling or whatnot.
The brand recognition
is really just the brand aspect. So
very important.
Kind of thinking about what you're talking about, and for sure, but at the same time realizing that sometimes just having posts going is more key sometimes than what's in the post type of thing. In that
the consistency is, and internally that's what Instagram wants. So like they're going to reward people that are doing it consistently.
Any thoughts on where it's going?
I mean, I was secretly relieved when, I didn't want TikTok to go away, but I was relieved to not have another avenue to worry about.
Is it gone right now? Actually,
no, it's back. It's here.
Back, right?
Yeah, and I don't think it's going away.
Okay.
When Trump saved it or whatever, know. So I think, but there was a big influx of TikTokers now going back to Instagram, and they still are staying there because they feel like it's safer. So
that's actually, I take that back. That is the one place that I had not been.
Yeah.
And TikTok. I will say mostly because I couldn't automate that posting aspect.
Sure.
Everything had to be manually done on that capacity. So from a time and effort perspective, I just didn't have the time to constantly go in and redo that every time. But so in some ways I was like, oh yay, maybe more people Instagram type of scenario for a little bit. So we'll see.
Easier to monetize
but
that.
There's always going to be a new one coming up, right? And so not trying to pigeonhole myself in that capacity, knowing that, the next generation of kids will have their apps or however, I don't even know my kids, what I'm trying to keep them off social as long as possible in some respects. Yeah. That's a whole nother conversation for sure. But
it's a good decision though.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I appreciate the time. Is there any place as far as you want to point people to as far as tagging like that?
Sure. Speaking of social, the most important thing would be my Instagram, which is just at Maria Montgomery. TikTok is at Maria Montgomery 19, and then Facebook is just my name, or mariamontgomery.com if you want to. That's mostly like the coaching side of things.